Well, hello everyone. This is Dr. Ayleen, and this is Medicine Walk. And once again, this is Medicine Walk from my office. So, welcome. And today is going to be a special discussion on grief. And recently, there's been some deaths in my family, extended family. And first and foremost, I want to send my love and prayers and everything to those who are most impacted by these deaths. And know that even though I can't be there with you in person, I'll get out there as soon as I can. And recently, I was working on processing grief. And it really is interesting because when you start thinking about what grief means to each one of us. Now, we can grieve anything. We can grieve the loss of someone through their passing. We can grieve the loss of someone through their, maybe they just went away. Maybe they just moved on. We can grieve the loss of a job. We can grieve the loss of a pet. We can grieve a sporting event loss. It's fascinating all the different ways that we can experience loss. And as I was walking Sam in my usual early morning time, and that's my time that, I kind of put out those questions. And one of the questions I put out was, what does grief really mean? And the answer that I immediately got back was, grief means getting real in every feeling. And I thought about that. And I thought about the ways that sometimes, I know for me, when I go into a grief state, one of the things that I want to avoid more than anything else, almost in a reflex, is the idea of feeling what it is I'm feeling. Because when you're in grief, those feelings get very big and they get very scary. And it's really challenging to be able to find balance with that. And I've worked with a lot of people in grief, and I have had my share of losses. So I have, been to that particular place before. But when I thought more and more about it, getting real in every feeling, it started to seem that grief isn't necessarily a trap door dropping you into pain. Grief can actually be the way to get out of it. It can be the doorway out. There's a saying, no way past it but through it. So in thinking about grief, and for those of you who know that, I'm sorry. And I'm sorry you're going through what you're going through. And it could be grief in any way. Whatever it is you're going through that is creating that tension, that stress inside of you, I'm sorry. And I'm here for you. And I'm putting every good thought I can out for you. I believe in your ability to make it through this, even when it does seem overwhelming, even when it does feel like you're being pulled under a riptide, which, what they always say is, if you get caught in a wave or caught in a tide, first thing you do is not fight it. You allow it to take you out, understanding that at some point it's going to get weaker, and then you just swim parallel to the shore and then work your way in slowly. But the first step is surrendering, realizing that you can't control it, realizing that there's nothing that can be done to fix it. And I get the desire to fix it. And it can be really tricky for people witnessing someone's grief to avoid not trying to fix it or avoid trying to fix it. I mean, everybody wants everybody to be happy, especially when you love someone. And when you see someone going through something that is so hard and it just breaks your heart that they're going through it, the instinct is to say, okay, there's got to be some way I can get them to stop feeling what they're feeling. Maybe the person feels that they didn't spend more time with someone. And the reflex is to find all the reasons. No, you spent lots of time, you did a wonderful job, and all of this. And that's not really what helps in that moment. What helps in that moment is to say, wow, this really, it's really a big thing for you, and I'm sorry. And if you want to talk about it, I'll listen. Or can I get you a cup of tea or a cup of coffee? And then just sit and allow that person to express whatever they need to express. Grief is hard on the person experiencing it, and it's hard on those bearing witness. And like I said, I've had my share of being in both situations. And it's not easy. And it's not comfortable. And it's frustrating. The person is going through the part of the anger phase. Remember, there's those 5 steps of grief. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. And understand, just because you went through it once does not mean you cannot end up revisiting one or more of those parts. I did. When, and like I said, these were 2 deaths that were 1 day apart in my mom's family. And it brought back a lot of my feelings about when my mom passed away, and when my dad passed away, and when my sister passed away. And it was really, really rough, because when I figured that, well, I've already dealt with this and I'm good. And yet I spoke with my uncle on Saturday. On Sunday, I got up in front of my church congregation to do the morning prayer, and I burst into tears. And I had such a hard time talking. And all I knew was that in that moment, I was missing everybody. And telling myself in my own head, come on, you can do this. You're a spiritual person, and you can, you've got all these tools. And in that moment, I was just someone in grief. I was someone who, in front of an entire room, was getting real in every feeling I was having. And that getting real part can be kind of tricky, because when you're working on getting real with a feeling, you kind of have to bypass the filters and the stories, and because it goes through a filter. Maybe it goes through a filter of self-judgment, maybe it goes through a filter of guilt, maybe it goes through a filter of sadness. It's really appropriate to be sad when sad things happen. It doesn't mean that the next day you're not gonna brush yourself off and say, wow, that was not okay. But I can figure out a way to move forward. And I can process it, and I can find peace with it. And sometimes that's all you can do. Sometimes all you can do is say, well, I can make it through today, or I can make it through the next hour, or I can make it through the next 5 minutes. One of the things that I did was when I was going through different grief processes, and one was of me was no longer a part of my life. Another piece was at the same time I was losing my house. And so there was a lot going on at that point. And what I did was schedule a time every morning because, I do a lot of stuff. I'm really, really busy and, and I've got a lot of things that I take care of. So I chose that I would get up an hour early, and in that hour, I would cry. And I would just let myself cry and feel everything that I wanted to feel and not limit myself in the grief that I was feeling. Then I would get up, wash my face, walk the dog, and go on with my day. And I knew that I would make it all the way through that day. And then the next morning, I'd wake up an hour early and I would cry. And that helped me to process it. It helped me to get real in every feeling. Maybe one day I was crying because I felt sad. And then another morning I would be crying because I felt angry and frustrated. And maybe another morning I would be crying for the joy that, that the house meant to me, and the joy that I would be able to move on in my life. And I'm sure many of you have experienced that, where one door closes and another one opens, and yet you still grieve it. One of the things that when I do counsel people who are in grief, people who lose a pet are so profound for me to bear witness to, because a lot of people don't get it. A lot of people don't understand. Well, it was just a dog, just a cat, it was just a bird, it was just an iguana. Whatever it is that it was your friend. It was someone who loved you unconditionally. And I think about the pets that I've lost and that I still think of, and who I still miss, and yet it's gentle. I have, I had a dog who passed away, and then I ended up with another dog, and that dog passed. And, they were both really old, and it was time. And a cat that I loved very much, and then another cat. Right now, I have Sam, and I have my black cat named Luna. And I love them both very much. And I know that one day they're going to get old. And it will be that time for me to say goodbye to them. But just because your best friend walks on four legs, or swims, or slithers, or flies, it doesn't mean that they don't have a very special place in your heart. And when people see someone grieving the loss of a pet, seems to be an instinct to try to minimize it. Well, it was just a dog. Come on, you can get another. And what that does is that cuts off the feeling. That prevents you from being in your feeling. It prevents you from getting real in every feeling, because then suddenly there's this judgment, and it's, oh wow, maybe I shouldn't be grieving so much. Maybe I'm being silly. I know someone who grieved when they had to give up their car. It was their first car they had ever had, and it was they were in an accident, and the car was totaled. And they grieved that car and the good times. I mean, that car was like a person to them. And I'm sorry, if you've ever had like your first car that you've had for a long time, and you love that car, and if something were to happen to it, or something did happen to it, how many of us remember when, we had to give up that first car we ever had? Especially maybe it was the first thing we bought on our own. That's grief. And it shouldn't be minimized. And I hope you don't let anybody minimize it. Relationship that broke up, that, I mean, you know, in your heart you knew it wasn't the right thing, or it didn't work out, or for whatever reason, that, you know, in your heart you was like, no, this is not bringing me joy, this is not helping me. And the instinct that most people would have is, good riddance, you're better off without them. And yet you still grieve that loss of what was going to be, or what you figured was going to be. And often in grief, that's one of the biggest pieces. It's not quite so much what was lost, but the story that was attached to it. And I had a story attached to my home, and I lost it. And then I ended up with the home I always dreamed of. Little cabin in the woods, surrounded by trees near a river. I mean, I couldn't have gotten better. And the house is actually doing fine. You know, the new owners that bought it fixed it up real nice in a way that I couldn't afford to. And I can feel the house being happy. And yet I grieve the loss of it, because I added the story of what it meant. It had been my parents' house, and I lost it. And so therefore it was like I felt I disappointed them. And often in grief, that comes in, that feeling of having disappointed, feeling of having not done enough. Or maybe it's the feeling that something else was not done enough for you, that somebody wasn't there when you needed them, or that your needs were not acknowledged. Yeah, it's about getting real in every feeling. Because once you do, once you are able to kind of, you know, it's like, okay, here we go. All right, this is my grief. Now I'm going to sit and I'm going to be with this. And I'm going to peel back the layers, and it's like peeling an onion, including the tears. But I'm going to peel back the layers of exactly what I'm feeling about this. And maybe in certain moments, you don't know what you're feeling. There are times when I have no idea what I'm feeling about something, and I'll usually say so. Well, how do you feel about that? It's like, you know, I really don't know. I don't know how I feel, but I know I feel something. And my feeling is that I need to sit with that and figure out, okay, if I'm feeling pain, where is that pain coming from? Is it coming from fear? Is it coming from sadness and loss? Is it coming from frustration and anger? Because sometimes when things happen that are really painful, it sucks. Well, like I say, it's fun. Life is fun until it isn't, and it sucks until it doesn't. And when you're in one of those parts that sucks, it's not fun. And it's very easy to get pulled under by it. It's very easy to get lost and feel that you're never going to feel anything else ever again. After my dad passed and after my mom passed, well, my sister passed before my mom. And so when my mom passed, you know, there's always, you know, the things you need to do and stuff to take care of. And one of the things that I know I do is that if there's something I can't do anything about, and if it's creating an emotion in me, if it's creating that grief to the point where I can't function, it's like, you know what? I got stuff to do. And I know there's probably a lot of you that do the same. You bury yourself in other stuff, anything else, so that you don't have to deal with it, you know, with what it is you're feeling. I mean, if I can run 20 paces ahead of it, I'm good. And ultimately, it will wait and it'll catch up. You can't outrun it forever. Those feelings need to be felt. And it's okay to feel them. I remember the time when I thought that if I started crying, that I wouldn't stop. That I would be so overwhelmed that I would literally cry myself to death, or at least spend all of my time crying. And one day I just let it happen. I let myself feel it, because if I let myself feel it, I knew the tears would come. And I cried and cried, and after a while, I just kind of felt empty. So I laid down and I went to sleep, and I woke up and I cried and cried, and then I got sleepy again. But each time there was less and less time that I was crying, because you're not going to cry forever. Honestly, you're not. It may feel like that. But after a while, you're going to notice that there are gaps that start coming in when you're not thinking about it, when you're doing other stuff, and then you remember, and then, you feel it. And then there are more gaps, and those gaps get longer and longer. Then there's laughter. There is moments where you find something funny. And then you go back to grieving. And then you find something else funny. Or you get irritated about something that is totally off topic, but, it's like, oh, heck. And step at a time, you move through it. You are able to process it and integrate it. The way to do that is by acknowledging it. It is really hard to let something go if you don't have a handle on it. It's like having somebody, hold up a pair of glasses, and if I were to hold this out to you and say, okay, let go of the glasses. Well, you can't let go of it until you've got it in your hand. We can't let go of what we're feeling until we really feel it. We can't let go of what it is that, we want to be able to release unless you've got it, unless you see it for what it is, unless you experience it and know it. That's getting real in every feeling. And every feeling isn't great, but it's real. And you have every right to it. No one can take that away from you, and no one should try. And please don't let anybody take that from you. When I talked to my uncle, because the two members of the family that were lost, one was his daughter, and another was a family elder who had been there to support him and help him through a lot throughout, the vast majority of his life. And he said that you never really lose anybody who passes as long as you're still here to remember them, which I thought was really cool. The things that we grieve, they may not be in our life anymore, but nothing can take away what it meant to you. Nothing can take away the memories. And yeah, the memories for a while can hurt. And maybe you don't want to go there, which you don't have to. You will eventually. The joy of what you had will outweigh the pain of the loss. And ultimately, I firmly believe that the only thing greater than the power of love, than the price of love, is the power of it. The power of love will always outweigh the price. It will always be worth it to love. It will always be worth it to risk being hurt, because what we get is so much more important. So if you're going through something, like I said, I'm sorry. And I'm here. And I know you can get through this, because I know there are people who love you, who are there to help you. And if you can't find any of them, contact me. I'm here for you. I believe in you, and I love you. So it's not so bad getting real in every feeling, because as you do, it lights the way to acceptance and peace. Joining me, and if you found value in this, then like, subscribe, and if you subscribe, there's a little bell. You can click the little bell, and that will let you know every time that that we're going to be doing a broadcast. And for my dear Michelle, I hope you feel better soon. And I know that as you rest, your body is healing. So don't worry, everything's okay. Be happy. Accept that sometimes grief happens. You don't have to hide from it. Just find somebody who can just kind of hold that space for you. So you can, what was it? I get sidetracked sometimes. Like, you can share, especially if you know somebody who's going through grief that might like to hear about another tool that they could use that could help them. Comment. I love getting comments. And with this video, we will pass 1,000 views, our very first 1,000. So thank you all for being a part of that. And it's cool. And I'm really happy to be here with you. And I will be here next week. And if you want to reach me between now and then, you can find me on Twitter. You can join our Facebook group, Medicine Walk with Dr. Ayleen. And you can also contact me by email. So you can reach me through my website at www.the-healing-house.com. So there's lots of ways to reach me. You can Google me. So I just want you to know that you're going to be okay. And I wouldn't say that if I didn't mean it and know it in my heart. I may not know you, but I guess in a way I do. We're connected. So until next time, I wish you balance and I wish you blessings from my heart to yours. I love you.